Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shauna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Playbook for Performance podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Corden, and we are at week 20 of our 20-week challenge. Congratulations. You have really done a great service for yourself and the rest of the universe, because strong, resilient people really make a big difference in our world. So, today we're going to be talking about celebrating, and you might think, well, why is this a lesson in the 20-week challenge? How does this make us more resilient? Well, there's a lot of reasons why, so let's get started. So, when do I suggest this lesson? In particular, when we cannot acknowledge just how far we've come. We are constantly comparing ourselves to our perfect or ideal, and if you've been following the news at all about Facebook and Instagram, etc., you can see that over a third of our young women are feeling depressed, have had thoughts of suicide, and I chalk it up to the fact that the algorithms are pointing them to unhealthy examples, but also that they are always comparing themselves to an ideal. If I'm a young, impressionable 13-year-old and I'm constantly looking at, I'll just say Kim Kardashian, who has all the resources in the world to perfect her life in terms of money, talent, mentors, plastic surgeons, you name it, and I'm comparing myself to that, I will naturally feel unhappy. Or I think that that might be the only road to success, and that's just simply not true. What we really want to do is create that ideal, and maybe that ideal does encompass some of the aspects of Kim Kardashian's life. I don't know. That's not my value set. But if it was, what are the steps that I can take to get there? What are the habits that I need to create? What's the identity I need to assume? What is it about that that's so appealing? And I would encourage people to look at an amalgam of different examples out in their life. I would love to have the patience of Mr. Rogers. I would love to have the fun and creativity of Julia Child. Those are two of my heroes. But what are the habits and identities that we need to assume in order to create that? And once we've done that, once we have said, I'm going to practice meditating 10 minutes a day to create more of an attitude of patience in my life. So I'm a patient person is the identity, and I have a habit of meditating 10 minutes each day to create that patience. Then I'm working on those steps. And instead of comparing myself to Mr. Rogers all of the time, what I want to do is compare myself to where I started from. And this whole idea about this is highly articulated in a book called The Gap and the Gain. I highly recommend it. I'll put it in the tags below the show. But really, we're looking for comparing to where we started from, not the ideal. Because as we mature, we may decide that ideal is simply not attainable for someone of our, flexibility or whatever that might be. Or that we don't want to devote the time to mastering the craft that it would take in order to be Mr. Rogers. So we really need to acknowledge how far we've come. Now, 20 weeks is a long time. These podcasts on average, 15 minutes, etc. So that's, 4 hours or so that you have devoted to coming this far. 5 hours. So think about that and applaud yourself for making the investment, the homework that you did that came from the lessons in the podcast. We want to do that. Now, I will confess, and I talked about this a little bit on the last podcast, I have been one of those people who have just gone from achievement to achievement to achievement to achievement. kind of searching for that satisfaction and happiness that comes with that growth. As I have matured, I recognize that the satisfaction comes with the process as opposed to the end result. And so before last Thanksgiving, I embarked on 75 Hard. 75 Hard is a challenging habit list that you practice daily for 75 days. And if you fail at any point, you got to start over at the beginning. And I developed some very good habits that came with that system. I sort of expected, I had been joking with all my friends that, on day 76, I'm going to have a martini for breakfast after not drinking for 75 days. It was probably another week and a half before I had a drink. So it really wasn't that, the habits that I had cultivated through that program were really the satisfaction and the celebration as opposed to, some end result. So I want you to think about that. Often when I'm working with my clients and they achieve a major milestone, whether it be running their first marathon or getting a promotion or getting a salary bump or being recognized in their profession, they often will lament and they will say something to the effect of, is that all there is? And they actually become quite a bit, not clinically depressed, but depressed after the achievement because they had this expectation that things would be different. Michael Phelps talks about this quite a bit in terms of he's the most recognized Olympian in all of history and yet struggles with depression now that his identity has changed, his habits have changed, etc. And so, what is it that we need to do to not fall into that trap? And I will say to acknowledge and celebrate, recognize the gain, and really take the time to acknowledge, whether it be through some kind of ritual, whether it be through a party, whether it be some kind of celebration to say, hey, we did this. We put in the effort, the time, and here's how I've grown. So a lot of times in corporate, we have what we call a lessons learned or a postmortem on a project to say, how can we run the best one, the next one better? And I would suggest that you do the same thing when it comes to your habits, any achievements you have, etc., to do your own sort of postmortem of, would I recommend 75 Hard? And I've actually decided I will do a podcast just devoted to how I approached 75 Hard and what I learned about myself. So you can look forward to that next week. But do recognize some key points here. Comparison is the thief of joy. So if we compare ourselves to others, we will always feel like we come up short. And we can only see what's on the outside. We can't see what's on the inside. We don't know their personal satisfaction or struggle, especially if we're looking at something as superficial as Instagram, where there are lights and editing and filters and, that one moment, as opposed to everything that's going on behind that. Okay. And so we only want to compare ourselves with our own yesterday or where we started. One of the fundamental principles and habits that you develop in 75 Hard is a daily progress picture. And I was kind of like, yeah. When I looked at my before and my after of the 75 days, I was shocked. I was shocked because, when you change so little day by day, you don't think it's that big a change. Then when you do the comparison at the end, you go, whoa. So we really want to acknowledge how far we've come. And it's not just, now I have this credential and before I didn't, or now I have a marathon medal and before I didn't, but it's what did I learn about myself in this process? What did I learn about running each day? And I would say that anybody who's a runner, and I've done, multiple marathons myself, is that there is some clear thinking that's happening. That it's, and I think you can achieve this with walking, with rucking, with hiking, etc. But that kind of rhythmic motion allows your mind to wander and be creative, right? Sometimes on a bad day, you're going to be like ticked off and have a little FU attitude. But, that's what comes with kind of sifting thoughts in that meditative process. And so we do want to make sure that you recognize the growth that has come from those habits, what's happened in that process, and where you've come. And I'll talk about some of mine next time when we talk about the 75 hard. So you have tackled skills that last a lifetime. When we talk about growth, recognize that these habits that you've built in order to build your resilience, these 20 lessons, they will last you a lifetime, and they're going to be a lot more applicable than any degree that you earned. Now, some people might be like, I just, spent $100,000, $200,000 on this degree. People change professions all the time. My background is in art and art history. I started a master's program in crop and soil science. I use very little of that today. I do keep a food garden, but I'm not practicing the principles in crop and soil science. I might be interesting dinner conversation with my art and art history background. But these things like boundaries, standards, values, all of these lessons that we learned in terms of our family and being problem-free and choosing a healthy attitude, these things will last you your entire life. Your entire life. You will rely on these skills again and again and again. And as you become stronger, just like when you're lifting weights, after a bit, you are ready for the next level of weights. You can do more reps, you can do heavier weights, etc. This will be true as well with your standards, your boundaries, your values. You will be constantly upgrading them based on the foundation you've created here. So recognize that these things are going to serve you forever, and it's a great idea to come back and revisit these. So our first podcast was way back, podcast 62, when we were talking about building this resilience. And we started off with tolerations. What is it that you're putting up with that drains your energy? How can you eliminate those tolerations and get rid of them so that your life is more satisfying and you have more energy? Very quickly, once you've mastered that skill, when something emerges new in your life and you recognize, this is a toleration, you won't have patience for it. You'll get rid of it and solve it permanently. And so that's what we're really aiming for. And again, we're talking about building your resilience. So through these lessons that we went through, you're getting rid of things that are essentially driving around with the emergency brake on or carrying a backpack with a bunch of heavy rocks on it that aren't serving you in any way. That's what we're really talking about in this 20-week challenge. So congratulations. Do go back, do revisit. If you have questions about some of these lessons we've gone through, like 10 daily habits, simplifying your life, restoring your integrity, all of those things are really important. And if you have questions about those, I'm here to help. So do recognize that when you've done these things, these 20 lessons, in terms of building your resilience, what you're building is stability. When something comes out of you, blindsides you out of left field, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a personal loss, you are not going to get thrown so off course that you don't know where to start. You've got enough of a foundation that you can bend, and you will be really creative, resourceful, and remain whole. And those are the fundamental pieces of coaching. That we don't coach people who are not in that space. That is a fundamental belief that we as coaches hold about our clients. And so we recognize that through this process, you have created that. Maybe you didn't feel whole in the beginning. Maybe you felt like you were a little bit broken. Maybe you didn't feel like you had good resources or could access good resources. Maybe you didn't feel like you had that many creative ideas. But through this process, we have surfaced those and created the awareness that you do have those. And so that's something to really be proud of. So I hope you are proud of yourself. Now, will you encounter a wobble? Sure you will. It happens. What do? You go back to the lesson, you double down, and you say, okay, how can I upgrade on this? What was missing, or what did I not account for? And I will say that, in the thousands of people that I have trained through this program, when we encounter a wobble, it's an intersection of two things. One of them is poor hygiene. And I don't mean like flossing your teeth and wearing deodorant, but having adequate sleep, nutrition, hydration, prayer, meditation, exercise. Those 5 things we lump into something we call hygiene. And that one of those things done poorly, or all of them done poorly, plus an event, can throw you off course. So when that happens, go back to the basics. Look at your sleep, look at your nutrition, look at your hydration, look at your exercise, look at your prayer, meditation, etc. Whatever you're doing there, protect those things like they're the most valuable asset in your portfolio. Go back, do that. Then when you are well rested, well nourished, etc., then look at the thing that broke, whether it was you flew off the handle at someone, you were reacting instead of responding, or if you're not just finding joy in things, look there after you're well rested. I never recommend that people have a big fight, job interview, any kind of important performance activity like that without all the hygiene stuff in place. So be sure to look there if you see a wobble, okay? Now, we created this whole program so that all of you would, of course, get to this point and you'd have this achievement and you'd say, yes, I am resilient. I can withstand, the storms. I'm not going to break. I will bend. And if you want to bring this to your team, your organization, please contact us. We want to help. We want a flourishing society that has all the freedoms that they deserve and that they can take advantage of them and enjoy them. So with that, take good care. We do want you to subscribe. If you're on our YouTube channel, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. If you're on Apple, please follow. Otherwise, subscribe with your Apple podcast. Do reach out to us. We would love to work with your organization and bring these lessons to your team. Next week, tune in. I'm going to be talking about all my lessons from 75 Hard. Until then, take good care.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shauna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shaunacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shauna Corden.